What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys had a really great holiday. I want to wish you guys all a Merry Christmas. I'm recording this the night of the 25th, so hope you guys all had a really good time with family and everything, and hope it all went the best. And hopefully it went all the best for you guys in fantasy football as well. Obviously, we just got through the semifinal matchups, so we're going into the final week of the fantasy football playoffs. For most of you people, if you do happen to have a Week 18 play or finals, highly recommend you do change that going forward in your league, just because obviously there's a lot of potential situations where teams rest players and all that in the final week of the season. So it's best to wrap things up here in week 17, in my experience. And I think most people would agree with that. Yeah, had a really wild week 16, a lot of heartbreaks. I lost a home league game by 2 points. I had basically Saquon versus Hurts at the end of the game. Didn't quite come through there. Had another game I needed 20 points between Purdy, Kelsey, and Odell Beckham, and didn't get it. So just moving on to 2 finals out of my 7 leagues this year, but hopefully you guys have done a little bit better. Hopefully you guys are doing well, and hopefully we can get you guys all ready to roll with the waiver wire here. I'll be going over quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses in terms of players that should be helpful pretty much only just for this upcoming week. Obviously, there's no sense in having stashes at this point. We're not grabbing handcuffs, hoping for an injury unless you do happen to have that week 18 finals matchup. So really, we are just looking at matchups this week, and anyone you pick up, you're really either playing defense on your opponent or you're trying to pick up a player and play them. When I say playing defense on an opponent, something I probably should have touched on a little bit more earlier on in these videos in the playoffs. Really look at who you're playing in this matchup. Maybe you've got an opponent who's got Brock Purdy, who somehow squeaked through. They're going to need a quarterback potentially this week. Go play defense on waivers, pick up the best quarterback available. Don't let them get a good quarterback matchup against you. And same thing, maybe your team opponent needs a defense. Maybe you've got your set already. Play defense to keep your opponent from getting these best players. So all these players should be useful. Hopefully you guys have your lineup set enough that you're not needing to look too much towards these waiver wire ads once you get into these final matchups, because obviously you've got a good team if you made it this far. But I'll just go over some players here and hopefully we can get you guys rolling. So let's get into the quarterbacks here. Starting things off with the quarterback position, my number one ad this week would be Russell Wilson. Get a matchup against the Chargers this week. This is a Chargers defense that's just been awful all season, and honestly, it's gotten worse over the last couple of weeks. They did perform relatively okay this last week against the Buffalo Bills, but even still, Josh Allen came through with a big game. Russ has actually played relatively well for the Broncos so far this season, sort of not necessarily garbage timed his way to a big performance against the Patriots last week, but show that he can still be explosive. This does sort of hinge just a little bit on the availability of Courtland Sutton. The offense did seem to struggle quite a bit until they got into that hurry up mode without him. So if Sutton's going to miss this game with concussion, I don't think I'd be as excited about Russell Wilson, but I do think that this is a plus matchup for them. The Broncos, although not technically eliminated, are still technically in the playoff hunt. So they're still going to be trying to win this game. They want to make sure they can do their best to finish with a record above 500 this season. Broncos will still probably do their best to win this game, and I think Russ is going to have a pretty good performance in it. And on top of that, Russ is obviously playing for more than just his next couple of weeks, because there's obviously a lot of speculation surrounding where he might end up next year. So Russ will be playing well. He should play well this week, and the Chargers are a great defense. After that, Derek Carr. It's a great matchup for him against the Buccaneers, one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. And obviously, Derek Carr really seemed to sort of get on the same page with Chris Olave this last week. On top of that, Rashid Shaheed really gives them a great deep threat. There's the possibility of Michael Thomas coming back as well. Just a really great setup here for Derek Carr. I can't imagine considering benching him. Not necessarily, you can bench him obviously, but just a really great matchup. One of my favorite streaming options this week. Jordan Love, another great streaming option, gets the Vikings defense, who, although they've been great over the course of the season, have sort of sputtered a little bit over the last couple of weeks, giving up a ton of points to both the Cincinnati Bengals and the Detroit Lions. So this is a position here where I think Jordan Love could find some success. He's played really well lately, could get some receivers back as well. I think Jordan Love's in a good position. And then Joe Flacco, I've got to mention him. Obviously, he balled out this week. He beat me in my home league this week. He outscored my Jalen Hurts, so that sucked. So obviously balled out, been really good. He and Amari Cooper are clearly on the same page. It is a brutal matchup this week against the New York Jets, and I believe that is the Thursday night game as well. So do keep that in mind. It's really tough if you stream a quarterback on Thursday and he sort of puts up a goose egg for you, and that is possible this week. So I'm not in love with the matchup, but Joe Flacco's playing really well. He has yet to actually have a bad fantasy performance. So if you want to go with Joe Flacco, you totally can. I prefer all of the other options I listed above, but you could go with Joe Flacco if you want. He's been playing really well, so I just have to mention him at least. After that, we got to move on to the running back position. I'll start things off with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I think is actually in a big position where he could actually perform at a high level. The Kansas City Chiefs have a matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals this week. That does not scare me at all. The Bengals have been a really mediocre defense lately, and we just saw they got beat up pretty bad by the Pittsburgh Steelers. On top of that, Isaiah Pacheco left this game against the Chiefs with a concussion. We know Jerick McKinnon was placed on IR before this week as well. So CEH is in a position where if Isaiah Pacheco were to miss, CEH would operate as the primary back in an offense that, although hasn't been great, is still good enough. It's a good matchup against Cincinnati, and the Chiefs are clearly going to be looking to get right. So CEH would be a solid running back too if Pacheco ends up inactive. After that is Amir White. We've got to talk about him as well. Raiders are playing really well lately, to be completely honest. And on top of that, Josh Jacobs was not really a truly surprise inactive, but was inactive again this week. And Zamir White went over 100 yards again. Has played really well in the last 2 weeks. I think he's clearly a talented running back. And there is always the possibility that the Josh Jacobs situation sort of just results in him being shut down for the rest of the season. Obviously, he's banged up. He's obviously going into a free agent period as well. So we'll see how much they really want to play around with him potentially being available. But if Josh Jacobs continues to be inactive, Zamir White will be a really quality matchup guy and someone you could use as a running back too. Kenneth Gainwell, I want to bring him up. We saw him get more involved this week. Obviously not the starting running back, or not the running back you want in Philadelphia. That is still very clearly DeAndre Swift. But Kenneth Gainwell played really well this last week. It's sort of like a 1A, 1B situation. And they've got to match up this next week against the Arizona Cardinals. Pretty much the worst run defense in the NFL. It's a really good opportunity to target them every single week. We saw Khalil Herbert have a big game against them this last week. So Gainwell's got an opportunity here. He'll probably see 10-ish opportunities. Could easily rip off a couple big runs. I think Gainwell could be like a really low-end running back 2 option if you happen to find yourself in a bad spot. Tyjae Spears, I've got to mention him. He's continued to be more and more involved in this Titans offense. They're really completely out of it at this point, but they do play the Houston Texans. Texans have struggled lately, especially on defense. They really can't stop the run very effectively, nor can they really stop the pass. So Tyjae Spears has got an opportunity here. He'll be more involved. He's like a low-end running back option, could be used as a flex in a PPR format. You could certainly do a lot worse than Spears. He should be on like the starting lineup bubble, at least at this point. Kareem Hunt, got to mention him, continues to get short yardage work and everything for this Browns offense. They've been playing really well lately. There are a lot of scoring opportunities in general, and they play a Jets defense who is normally really good, but it's not actually very good against the run. Certainly an opportunity here for running backs to provide some value. On top of that, we saw them really get carved up in the second half by the Commanders, so potentially this Jets defense just isn't the same. I mean, they sort of at least haven't been as good over the last several weeks. So you could use Kareem Hunt as a super low-end option. I don't love it. If you are playing him, you're probably in a bad spot, but I do have to mention him. Jeff Wilson, just got to mention him. We saw he actually saw the field quite a bit this last week. It was basically a 3 running back backfield, clearly with the 1A in that situation being Raheem Mostert. But we did see Raheem Mostert lead the game for some time with an injury. Devon Achane got a lot more snaps than Jeff Wilson, but Devon Achane also clearly wasn't being given a full allotment of snaps. If there was a situation here where Raheem Mostert ends up inactive, I think Jeff Wilson's someone you could potentially spot start if you really needed to, although the matchup is not good. They do play the Baltimore Ravens. And then Khalil Herbert, got to mention him, obviously coming off a monster week. Could throw him in the same situation as like a guy like Roschon Johnson as well. Both are involved in the offense. We will want to monitor what's going to happen with Deonta Foreman. Deonta Foreman missed this last week due to some personal issues, but if Deonta Foreman were to come back, I probably want to avoid the entire Bears backfield. But if Foreman remains out, I think both Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson are decent options if you need to go there. Next up at the wide receiver position, I'll start off with Demario Douglas. Obviously, he's just a clear wide receiver 1 in the offense. He's a guy they're targeting quite a bit, and he's actually just a really good player. I've liked him the last several weeks. He looks good on film, and he's someone that I do think could end up having a really quality NFL career. And they've got a decent matchup this week against the Buffalo Bills, a team that the defense has been better lately, but it's obviously a situation where the Patriots should find themselves trailing. It should lead to a little bit more of a pass-heavy environment for the Patriots. Should make Demario Douglas on your flex radar and someone you could use this week if you want to. Got to mention Gabe Davis, obviously coming off a big game. He's probably going to use us again this week, but he's a guy that you could use the flex option if you need to. It's a situation too where maybe you'll find yourself in a matchup this week where you're just a clear underdog. You just sort of smoke and mirrors your way into the finals, and maybe your opponent's just clearly got the better roster. If you want to shoot for the moon, Gabe Davis does offer that kind of ceiling. And after the 2 goose eggs before this last week, it's a good chance he found himself on a lot of waiver wires. So just check it out. Maybe you don't need him. I don't know if I'd have the stones to play him, but he is an option. He is someone that clearly put up a big game. So he's got to mention him. Josh Downs, got to mention him as well. This Colts team is obviously sputtering just a little bit. And we did see Michael Pittman get ruled out last week, sort of like a surprise inactive after clearing concussion protocol and then being ruled out the following day. But Josh Downs should operate as the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. It's a relatively plus matchup for the team as well. I do think that Josh Downs is a guy that you can flex in PPR formats. And I think he's someone that, especially if Michael Pittman ends up remaining out, should be at least in consideration for a starting role in a fantasy lineup. After that, I want to mention both Marvin Mims and Jerry Jeudy. We saw really this Broncos offense didn't operate at a very high level after Courtland Sutton left due to injury. But if they're in a situation where maybe they have a full week of preparation, it could finally be a situation where we see Marvin Mims get more snaps, could find himself on the field quite a bit more, and he could definitely be someone that we want to at least consider flexing. Jerry Jeudy, I'll mention him. I don't know if I trust him. Obviously, it's a really good matchup against the Chargers. Jerry Jeudy had a lot of opportunities the last time these two teams played, and he actually should have had a relatively big fantasy day, but he just couldn't come through with them. I still think Jerry Jeudy's a very good player. I don't think I'd have the stones to consider that, but if you're in a really deep league, I do think Marvin Mims is someone you could look at as a decent option. Rashid Shaheed, he's the one I really want to talk about. I think he's a really great flex play this week. They played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Absolutely fantastic matchup for opposing wide receivers, and Shaheed's clearly the preferred deep threat on this offense. I'm not going to say he's going to score a touchdown, but I really like his odds of connecting on a deep ball this week. Definitely someone that I think, especially if you need a ceiling play, Rashid Shaheed's a really great flex option. Joshua Palmer, got to mention him, came through with 5 for 47 this last week. Obviously not a fantastic stat line, but it's certainly serviceable as well. He's someone that you can use in your flex. And this Broncos defense obviously didn't play great at all and hasn't been great for each of the last 2 weeks in their games against Detroit and New England. You could see a situation where this Chargers offense surprises, puts up a few points, and Joshua Palmer is the clear wide receiver one if Keenan Allen remains out, so you could use him. KJ Osborne, I've got to mention him as well. KJ Osborne's actually just a really talented player. He's still very clearly normally the number 4 target in this offense, but TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison left this game in week 16 due to injuries. And we don't really know the true status of these guys going forward, but we could see KJ Osborne effectively operate as the number 2 target in this offense. And if that's the case, he is someone that you could consider streaming next week as a flex option. And then Curtis Samuel, I'll mention him as well. Just very clearly a guy that's involved in the offense. We saw that really with Jacoby Brissett, the offense did seem to take a bit of a step forward as well. And I think we might see Jacoby Brissett again this next week. It does elevate the floor a little bit for this offense. It's a team that you could definitely consider. It's a relatively tough matchup against the 49ers, but the 49ers are a team that actually do give up quite a few fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. It's not really as bad of a matchup as it looks on paper. So I think Curtis Samuel is someone that could come through with a solid day out of your flex position if you need to. Moving on to the tight end position, not a ton of options here. I didn't list him, but if Isaiah Likely happens to still be available, he's a high priority ad, would be the number 1 ad. I've talked about him several weeks in a row. So if you've been watching, hopefully you have Isaiah Likely. But if you don't, and he's still on waivers, somehow go at him. He'll be a really great ad. After that, Tucker Kraft, I want to mention him. Really good matchup this week against the Minnesota Vikings. He's been sort of on a bit of a mini heater. 3 straight really solid weeks out of the tight end position for him. He's just a good player. The head coach went out of his way to talk about how impressed they've been with Tucker Kraft. He's just someone that I do like, and there's so many injuries in this wide receiver room that I think Tucker Kraft's a really important part of this offense. They need to win out basically in Green Bay, and they've got a good matchup this week against the Vikings. So Tucker Kraft is a decent streaming option. Gerald Everett, I've got to mention him. It's pretty easy every single week. Whoever the team is playing the Broncos, target their tight end, and we saw Mike Gesicki even come through with a touchdown this last week for the Patriots. Gerald Everett's in a good spot. He's involved in the offense. You could definitely stream him, and he's a really solid option if you need to. And then Chig Okonkwo, involved in the offense, finally found the end zone last week, although it was a passing touchdown from Derrick Henry. So not sure how reliable or repeatable that is, but they do play the Texans this week. It's not a matchup that scares me, and Chig Okonkwo is a good player. So if he's there and the other options aren't available, I think Chig Okonkwo could come through. And they manufacture some touches for him. He's not going to goose you. He'll get you some points. Then you're just hoping he sort of gets lucky and falls in the end zone one more time this week. After that, I just want to talk about some defensive options. Start things off with the San Francisco 49ers. It's possible, and if not possible, extremely likely they've already been rostered in your league. But I could see a situation where a lot of teams were hesitant to continue rostering them this week. Obviously, teams didn't really want to start them this week against the Baltimore Ravens. So just keep an eye on that. This week, however, is fantastic for them. They play the Washington Commanders. Could be Sam Howell, could be Jacoby Brissett, but either way, not really scared of that. The Niners are going to want to get right after sort of getting embarrassed on prime time. So I think the Niners will come out and have a big game. They're my favorite option of the defenses this week. After that, the Jaguars, pretty easy. Just target the Panthers' opponent every single week. The Panthers did come through with a bit of a better game last week against the Packers, but the Packers' defense really just isn't all that great. I think the Jaguars are a team you could certainly pick up and really expect big things out of, especially because of how well they defend the run. They're going to make Bryce Young beat them, and I don't think Bryce Young can. After that, the Rams, they're a really solid option as well. They play the Giants. We know this Giants offense is going to struggle. Obviously, the Giants sort of made it look like they played a competitive game against the Eagles this last week, but there was a pick six along with a fumbled kickoff that really made that game look a lot closer than it was. They really just had the one big play to Slayton. So this Giants defense doesn't scare me at all. And the Broncos defense, I'll mention them. I'm obviously been disappointing the last couple of weeks for these guys, but they do play the Chargers. It's not really an offense that scares you. You could definitely do a lot worse than the Broncos this week. So that'll do it for the waiver wire video. As always, if you guys do have any specific ad drop questions or any of that, let me know in the comments. If you have any fab questions, pretty much the answer is spend it all at this point this week. There's nothing left. So don't hesitate. Do what you got to do. Play defense. If you have got more fab than your opponent, they need a quarterback, pick up the quarterback and spend all the fab. So do what you got to do. Get your win this week. We got to make sure that we bring home as many trophies as possible. So I really do appreciate you guys so much. Up next, I'll be bringing out the start sit video where I'll go over every single matchup, all the matchups again this week, get you guys as set up as possible for success and go over what to expect of every single player. And I'll help you guys with your lineup decisions. So I really appreciate all you guys. It's been a lot of fun this season. Hopefully we can get you guys some fantasy championships and let's bring this thing home one more week. So once again, Merry Christmas and thank you guys so much for watching and good luck this week. Peace.